welcome to the Bowser Press Co-op Podcast, Episode 2. Once again, you can find Bowser Press on bowserpress.tumblr.com. You can find episodes of the show as well as other articles. You can find Bowser Press on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter at BowserPressed, BowserPressed, and you can email BowserPress at bowserpressed@gmail.com. Today on the show, myself, Matt, and Isaac and I will be talking about inspirational games. So let's just jump right into it. Enjoy! Okay, so today I wanted to talk about inspiration through video games. There was an article published by Natasha Vargas Cooper on Advocate.com a couple weeks ago, and it's all about Glenn Greenwald and Edward Snowden, and it mentions, like a couple paragraph section in there got pulled out by some of the game journalists and things about how when Edward Snowden approached Glenn Greenwald to blow the whistle, he mentioned how he was inspired by video games and comic books. And because Glenn Greenwald didn't have any frame of reference for that sort of thing, he didn't ask him which, so that's still kind of up in the air, but it sort of got me thinking about like what video games have inspired us, how they've inspired people in the past, and that sort of thing. So, basically, the first thing worth mentioning is the fact that there's already a video game about Edward Snowden that's emerged, a browser game called Eddie's Run, and the game itself has you playing as Edward Snowden, running around, throwing laptops at NSA officials and FBI officials and things, and the game actually has a take action button that you can click on that takes you to like a form letter that you can address to Barack Obama and that sort of thing. So it's sort of the snake eating itself, where this man was inspired by video games to blow the whistle, and now you can play the game that was inspired by the man who was inspired by video games, and then you yourself take action.
It gets even funnier than that. Like maybe it'll be like show notes or something. Mm-hmm. But one of the first things that the site College Humor did. Mm-hmm. After the Snowden things happened, is they did a Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, but of course it was Where in the World is Edward Snowden. So
I didn't see that. Like, do you want to explain what it was? You'll just link it.
Oh, it's just there was. You ever remember the game show Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego?
Yeah, of course.
Which was spinned off from the game. Yeah, so it's like Where in the World is Edward Snowden? So they actually got a cappella to do it.
Oh, nice.
And, yeah,
that's fun.
I just thought that was an amusing factoid.
Yeah, that's fun.
Go on.
Okay, so yeah, I thought that was worth mentioning. And then thinking about the topic, I thought about probably the most obvious thing that has been signaled out as an inspiration in the real world from video games, which is the inspiration to commit real-life murders and acts of violence. And, video games have, I guess, experienced in the media some controversy starting around the mid-90s with the release of Mortal Kombat and Doom. And these are sort of the big games that we point to for starting that. Of course, there were violent games before that, but there wasn't really an attempt by the media so much to pin the reason for violent crimes occurring based on the games. And when you look at it, it's often like apparent. For instance, just looking at the Wikipedia entry, there's a mention of a boy or a man who killed himself, and then after the fact, his mom blaming EverQuest. It was. I mean, I don't. As far as I know, the man didn't leave a suicide note blaming it or anything like that. And of course, I mean, I'm sure there were way more complicated issues as to why he chose to take his life, other than his addiction to a video game. So often these stories are kind of like that. There's just like totally spurious correlations.
Yeah. I think the only time I can think of where there was a direct connection was those couple of times in, was it South Korea,
Hmm.
where there was those people that did like those 18-hour game sprints or some crazy amount like that, and they basically just killed themselves with exhaustion.
Yeah, and then
But
go on.
but you could really do that with with like anything potentially. Just people do stupid shit.
Yeah, absolutely. That reminds me of the time that the radio station had that contest to not pee in order to win a Wii. And someone, I think, got a bladder infection or may have even died holding in their
No,
pee.
a woman died, and like the thing about it that made it really that pissed a lot of people off is that someone actually did call in and tell them that that was going to kill someone.
And they just didn't heed the advice at all.
Yeah,
I mean, that sounds familiar. That sort of thing tends to happen. It seems in history.
yeah, or was it? It's called dramatic ironies,
Hmm.
or as we like to use in writing terms, foreshadowing.
Sure, exactly. Real life foreshadowing.
Yep.
Um, yeah, and then I think more recently there was a boy who played Call of Duty. I can't remember what the story was. There was something where the kid was grounded to his room, and
His mom turned it off, and his mom like banned him from playing, and he just decided to kill her after
is that
that.
what it was? Okay.
Yeah, but that that has to do with the person. I mean, there's been that happened was it with like I think that sometimes happened with television shows. There's just ever so often there's just like that one kid that's just, "Oh, you won't let me do this? Okay, you're dead."
Yeah, exactly, and that obviously points to much more deep-seated issues that are going on with that particular individual, as opposed to somehow media affecting a person's thought process that to that degree.
Yeah. Though I find it more ironic that as far as I can tell, it used to be like people would blame shit happening on like a book. Like that was seemed to be the big thing, and then you never really hear about that anymore. It's always a video game that's getting the blame now.
Well, it's the more relevant medium, I suppose. I'm you make me think of a quote from the original article that was the jumping off point for this topic. Uh, Glenn Greenwald mentions how he draws inspiration from books, but when he started to think about it and came around to Snowden's form of thinking, where a video game could provide you with real life inspiration, he saw it as no different from a great film or a great work of literature or something. So the fact of the matter is there are uh, inspiring elements, inspiring stories within games that basically fundamentally are no different from those in like a book. It's
Yeah. Well, as far as I can tell, and this is one of the things, you've heard of Joseph Campbell, right?
sure, yeah, Heart of
Yeah,
Darkness.
there's multiple forms of heroism, and as far as I can tell, the one that games most correlates with, as far as Campbell related stuff goes, was that the heroic action,
Hmm.
because most games, with the exception of oh, you're ironically playing a villain or some junk like that, are about there's some sort of evil force, and your character is the hero who is going to defeat it.
Right. Unfortunately, yeah, I mean, he that is a huge influence in game stories, and I would like to see maybe some other works provide inspiration for games. But yeah, especially like RPGs, you can't get away from it. Um, but yeah,
Yeah. Well, we have action now, and it seems to be the mechanics we've worked on the most because overall it's very simple. This has X amount of damage and needs to die, so get it to 0 HP.
Right.
Whereas it's a lot more complicated. Like if you want to make a diplomacy simulator, dear God, that would be really complicated.
And difficult to sell because it just doesn't sound like
Yeah,
it would be fun.
yeah, yeah. It's sad but true with us. It's more fun to repeatedly kick a prostitute after running her over with your car in GTA than it would be to, I don't know, argue your case in court for like 6 months.
Hmm. That's something people don't want to do in reality. So,
Yeah.
well, yeah, I think it speaks to the fact that, despite what some people would want to admit, conservatives who blame these violent acts on video games, they great creative works can provide a catharsis for people to act out their fantasies in a healthier environment. And the best sort of expression of that is what you describe, killing a hooker or something. And there's nothing very cathartic.
Probably not the most heroic act, though.
Not the most heroic, but it's definitely cathartic. And there's nothing really cathartic about a game where, as you say, you're, trying to, you know, be diplomatic or whatever.
There can be, though. Those are like rare exceptions. Like, like I think Phoenix Wright does a really good job of making dealing with the legal system this like crazy adventure. But even then, you aren't just a lawyer. Like you're an investigator, and you do all these other things. You interrogate people.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I think you mentioned that that's one of the game series that has been inspirational to you. Do you want to just jump into that then and talk about some of the games that we found inspirational?
yes. Well, it's. I just want to go over a thing. It's
Okay.
one little quick
Okay.
thing. I find it interesting, or I guess I should say more ironic, that for the longest time with games, we've had the whole claim of by people who weren't gamers that games are filled with so much violence, thus games make people more violent.
Yeah.
There's actually a lot more evidence in relation to that, or people have done a lot more legwork and looking into in that particular area of claim about that games affecting people's perceptions and the way they behave in relation to violence than there has ever been done in relations to gender issues, or I just should say sexism.
Mm-hmm.
And I will make the argument that if there's not really that much of a correlation we can draw between doing violent acts in a video game and doing violent acts in real life, it's kind of absurd to make the claim that somehow violence has no effect upon the person playing it, but somehow any sexy images or any depictions of women that you don't necessarily like will somehow influence the person, even though they're in the minority when you really look at them in video games.
Yeah. Um, yeah, there really, as you say, there hasn't really been any studies about sexism or the portrayal of sexual imagery in games quite as much as violence. I think that actually is surprising to me because a lot of these studies seem to be rooted in the idea that we need to guard our children from potential, threatening or, materials that they think that would have a, you know, that would have a poor influence on their upbringing or whatever. So, and we are pretty prudish in Western culture and don't really want our children. I feel like we're actually more afraid of sexual imagery, our children being exposed to sexual imagery.
We are.
Yeah.
We are, which is why you can go through GTA, gun down God knows how many people, pop their heads and whatnot. But the second there's something like you spend like unless you're really obsessed with the strip club, like there's a strip club you can go to optionally.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow that being in there is like this. Oh my God, you're pushing the bound. How dare you put this imagery in there?
Mm-hmm. Well, there were naked breasts in this one for the first time, other than the hot coffee mod. I
Yeah.
don't have a sense of how that went over. I don't really feel like the major media outlets have picked up on that, as far as I'm aware.
No, it seems that there's just the reactionary stuff has been more within the gaming community, but that seems to have more to do with just the quote unquote social justice warrior system or whatever the hell you want to call it that's going on. There's some sort of movement that's trying to associate itself into gaming, but like be it violence or sexism or anything else, the flaw I'm ultimately finding with a lot of these things is it's a very simple one. People are trying to work from a conclusion
Mm,
and then going back and finding the evidence that proves that conclusion instead of what you're supposed to do whenever you're researching or looking into something. Look at what there is and see what conclusions you can derive from the evidence around you.
yeah. And that echoes what you see with the blaming of games on violent acts. It's just they assume that must have been what triggered it, whereas it's not. It's actually often not the case.
Yeah, well, there's definitely a question of how much about what we take in and get exposed to affects us and in what ways. But we don't really know that.
Mm-hmm.
We're still trying to figure that stuff out. We with psychology, we know how you can do things to influence people. It's called propaganda, but we don't necessarily know like what how much the culture at large has an influence upon the person. There's always that question of nurture versus
Right.
nature and how much a person gets affected by it because language is obviously an aspect of nature.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something people are the way you speak is not something you're born with, it's something you're taught.
Right.
But yeah, enough with that tangent. Let's go on to games.
Okay. Yeah. So, do you wanna start us off and talk about one of your games on your list?
Yeah, just I guess we'll spend like maybe 5-10 minutes on a game.
Well, some
I know we both got Final Fantasy VII.
yeah, some of mine it's pretty obvious stuff, so it'll just be like a quick
Yeah,
anecdote or something.
yeah. Well, you can go into it if you want to. Just I guess we'll cover on a case by case
Yeah. Yeah.
basis. But yeah, Phoenix Wright, the entire Phoenix Wright series.
Okay. Now, explain it to me as an outsider because that's what I am. I've never played the games, and so help me understand why they're influential. Why what makes them so great? I guess.
A lot of it has to do with just the writing. Like and it's weird that we had the whole Beyond thing where we're talking about linearity because when you go over the Phoenix Wright series, they're all very linear.
Mm-hmm.
In general, there's only like kind of one answer, but the level of engagement you get with it because it is like a visual novel mixed with a lawyer simulator or some junk like that.
Mm-hmm.
In that the in that you have these cases that come up and the game does a very good job of giving you the sense that you're going to lose or like it ramps the tension up and then you have to figure a puzzle out and you have to like figure out if a person's lying or there's a piece of evidence that contradicts something that they're saying or sometimes you have to like push people and then you get another addition to their testimony that then you can do something with.
Is that like a dialogue tree sort of situation?
Uh, no,
Okay.
actually, it's more so that when they do it in the game, is that a person there'll be the event that happens before, and then there'll be the time where it lists their testimony. You can go back and forth through their testimony
Mm.
and comb through it looking for
Mm.
contradictions, those kinds of things.
That,
And that's one aspect. The other aspect of it is usually going to crime scenes and looking for evidence.
okay. So is that a little more strictly adventure gamey at that point?
Yeah, I guess you would call it adventure gamey. I like adventure games a
Mm-hmm.
lot. I know they're not as popular of a genre as they used to
Well, I
be.
don't know. I think that's changing now, though.
Well, yeah, well, The Walking Dead was basically an adventure game,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know. I do welcome there not being the absurd inventory puzzles and the pixel hunting. I never thought that that was really a strong suit with adventure games. I thought that the having something that was based around writing and
Hmm.
characters was what I enjoyed about them. And Phoenix Wright has, I mean, a lot of the characters are kind of cliche, but it's cartoony, so I guess it's more okay than the David Cage we're trying to do reality. It doesn't really work.
Right. Yeah, it's all about context and framing it right.
Yeah, and just the entire series is a lot of really interesting, quirky, unique characters. It actually even has one of the better video game movies.
Is it an anime?
No, they actually did a live action
Oh,
Phoenix Wright movie. It was directed by Takashi Miike of all
was it
people.
really? What?
Yeah, I know. This is one of those things in Japan, or I'm not sure if it's just Japan or it was with Miki. Like he'll do these family friendly movies, but then he'll still do stuff like Ichi the Killer.
Yeah, I had no idea. I really want to see this now.
I'll have to maybe send it to you or
Okay.
something. I don't know.
Yeah, that'd be good.
You could you could look it up, but it's actually one of the better done video game
That's
movies.
good.
Yeah.
That's not
Uh,
saying much, but I'm intrigued.
it's actually a good movie on its own right.
Okay.
That's what I'll say.
Okay.
So highest praise for adapting a video game.
Sure.
But I think it's enough on Phoenix, right?
Yeah. What?
Let's go for yours.
Um. How would you say that it's inspirational though? Like just in terms of how you perceive other games in terms of their writing and that sort of thing, or
It's just what is it? The way I sort of define inspirational, or at least media that's really inspirational, is that it gives you that certain kind of warm
okay.
feeling when you like you go through or like when you finish it.
Okay.
Like there's this really big catharsis when you're dealing with a particularly hard contradiction you spend a long time thinking on. It's like, ah, there you go, I gotcha, and you go objection, and the fingers pointed out. By the way, that's one thing they do have on the DS version that's kind of cool. You can actually just shout into the microphone objection,
That's awesome.
and it will go through.
Yeah. I don't know why I've not played these, but you're making me want to because the idea of the solving of the puzzles, for lack of a better word, based on just logic and looking through, what the people have said and looking for
Yeah.
inconsistencies. That's great. It's not based on some sort of esoteric language within the game. That
Yeah, I will forewarn you that there are like throughout the series, there's like maybe one or two cases. There's what there's one in the second game in particular that's kind of like the way the murder gets done is so like
mm,
nonsensical you would never guess,
mm,
but it actually has like really well written characters during that case, so it's kind of. Anyways,
okay, so there is some like weird obtuseness to it, but
well, it's Japanese,
mm,
and the way they wrote the game when they brought it over, they try to make it sound like it's taking place in the U.S.
right. I love that stuff though. I love the Japanese, emulating Western culture.
Yeah, but no, like they have like Shinto temples,
Hmm.
and it's supposed to be taking place in the U.S. It's like, where would this be?
Right. That's great.
Yep.
Okay. Well, yeah, I have probably a few that I can talk about in like one go or whatever. One of which would be Wii Sports. So I guess I looked at it a little more in an obvious sense in terms of inspiration for some of these games. And Wii Sports was a game that I got hooked on the bowling aspect of it, like most people that played it. And so at the time, I decided, well, I'm going to take these newfound bowling skills that I have and apply them to the real life bowling lane. So I went bowling, which I hadn't done in a long time, and I went to a bowling lane that was kind of old school and didn't have like the digital scoreboard thing. So you had to do your own score by hand on paper.
At the penciling.
Yep. And I had no idea how to score bowling. I had to like call a friend of mine and or actually what I did is I just sort of wrote down tally marks or something like that, And then I took the scorecard to a friend who did know how to score it, and he showed me like how to do it, and we figured out my scores after the fact. And so you have that extra layer of abstraction where I'm not even really figuring out my score properly, and then it turns out that the actual physical act of bowling is very different from the what I had considered to be just about the best approximation of bowling in a video game, where you're actually going through the motions and putting spin on the ball and that sort of thing. It turns out doesn't really apply to reality, and with the weight of the actual ball and the walking on the surface of the lane and everything, it's completely different. And on a side note, I did bowl again recently. It's something I do very rarely, and it was earlier this year, and ended up I was at like it was a birthday party, and it was a thing. Oh no, it wasn't a birthday party. It was a like a housewarming party, but not at a house. Go figure. But it was a thing where you paid for, I think, 2 hours of bowling, and we were there with a big party, so I didn't really get up to bowl very frequently. And I think we got about 2.5 games in, or 2 2/3 games in, and it wasn't until the last game that I really started to get in the groove. And by then, I was like, it was the game of my life. I think I was nearly at 200, and we hadn't even done all the frames, and unfortunately, we ran out of time. So I was kind of bummed about that, because I wanted to see just how good a score I was going to get. There was no doubt it was going to be the highest score I ever got. But
yeah.
So yeah,
bowling's fun. I've never really gotten too good at bowling, but bowling is a lot of fun.
It's fun. Yeah, I'm certainly not good at it either. The only reason I was doing well was just like, the gods of bowling blessed me at that moment. So
yeah.
So yeah, okay, that's good for now. We can move on to you now.
Okay. Are we just gonna go with the order of the list, or
You can do it however you want. I've arranged mine like sort of
to me, just I
categorically.
don't know. It goes once again. It's like the warm fuzzy feeling. House of the Dead Overkill. I know it's not the best game ever made, but it's one of my favorites. It leaves me with it leaves me with a big dumb smile.
Yeah, definitely. Have you did you see that they just released Typing of the Dead Overkill?
Yeah, yeah. It's actually they should have advertised this like better, because it actually does include House of the Dead Overkill. It just doesn't make it readily apparent.
Right. Yeah, I actually bought it, and we can talk. I'll talk about that when it's my turn or whatever. But yeah.
Let's just both talk about it, because it's already come up.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Typing of the Dead.
Yeah. The Typing of the Dead. I loved that game so much. It's so much, in fact, that this year finally, like, the inspiration came late, but I finally decided to make a Typing of the Dead costume to wear for Halloween this year. And
are you gonna have the Dreamcast keyboard?
yeah, I used the actual Dreamcast keyboard. The way I did it, I ended up having to. I drilled little holes in the flip down tabs of the keyboard, and then ran twine through those holes, and then tied it in a loop so that I could tie it around my neck, and have it at like a comfortable typing position. And then I super glued suspenders to my Dreamcast to turn it into a backpack, and then there was actually like an Instructable online where a guy took 2 Monster cans and sort of fused them together with tape, and then put foam around them to make it resemble the battery. I did that, only I used construction paper instead of foam, and then super glued that to the Dreamcast, and it looks pretty good. It was pretty cool. And I actually went to the Cleveland State University College radio station does a masquerade ball every year for free, and I went to that last night, and there ended up being like 500 people there, and it was like they were at capacity. They were beyond capacity, and there was no room to move in there, and ended up leaving early because it was just like I was getting like claustrophobic. It was just not fun. And but no one knew who the hell I was supposed to be, for one thing. And there were like food trucks outside, and I was getting some food, and I'm standing there eating my food, and this guy comes up to me, And he's like, "Oh yeah, I saw you wearing the Dreamcast there. Great system, underrated, you know." I'm like, "Yeah, you know, great, totally." He's like, "What are you supposed to be?" So like, here's a guy who actually like has played Dreamcast, knows about Dreamcast, somehow like still doesn't know like what I'm supposed to be. So I had to explain it to him. And
Yeah, Typing of the Dead didn't came out a little too late in the Dreamcast
yeah,
lifespan.
I think it was 2001. Would that have been the last year, or was it 02? I think it was 01.
Like late
Mm-hmm.
'01, early '02, something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I know I didn't pick it up until it was like heavily discounted. I think I got the game and a keyboard for like $15 brand new at EB when those were still around. But I did end up on the way out, walked past a guy that did know that got it. He was like, "Hey, Typing of the Dead." So that was a little bit validating.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what was it? Going with it, it's actually this is one of those places where video games excel where other mediums may not.
Mm-hmm.
Because let's face it, if you had a movie where a guy was killing things with a keyboard, like typing in the keyboard, it would be the stupidest thing ever. But somehow, you being the one doing it just makes it awesome.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Playing Typing that at Overkill recently, I forgot just how satisfying it is. Every single time you correctly type a letter, there's a gunshot, and there's just something really satisfying about that.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't necessarily gone through the typing thing. I've never necessarily been too good at typing games.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, I write things occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So,
yeah.
are you not much of a touch typist? Is that what you're saying?
What was it? I view they need a better tutorial one because I remember that in Typing of the Dead 2,
Mm-hmm.
they did have like this really awesome tutorial mode that taught you how to type better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that, and I didn't play with it much, but I know that it was in there, so that's nice. I've heard that
Yeah,
people have like learned to type from it, so that's cool.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Just Overkill is just what is it? I actually would almost call it one of the more cinematic games out there because it's
Mm-hmm.
just I
Very.
don't know. I just love the over the top cheesiness of everything that they do.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just love it. It's like these are my wheels. This is my pride and joy, and then it just blows up for no reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's just standing there. It's like, okay. Well, I think there's a bit of a reason. Then it just kind of makes him over. It sets him over the edge, and kind of allows that character to be even more violent or whatever throughout the game.
Actually, was it Isaac Washington seems like one of the more dynamic and interesting black characters you've ever seen in video games. Even though he's basically just Samuel L.
Mm-hmm.
Jackson.
I love that name, Isaac Washington.
Yeah, well, my first name's Isaac, so I'm just
Oh
like,
yeah.
every time I hear it, it becomes even funnier for me.
Right. That's great.
As you well know, Isaac, I enjoy pain. It's like a good Chinese dinner.
No sweet without the sour.
Yep. Oh, the dialogue is so like it's so over the top. It becomes awesome in a way. It's just or when they just the little things like the intentional flaws, like he
Mm-hmm.
knocks the guy's glasses off, and the next shot they're just back on.
Yep. Yeah, well, I mean, the game was very clearly influenced by the Grindhouse double feature with Planet Terror and Death Proof. I mean, it's
Yeah.
even got the intermission loading screens that look
Yeah,
exactly like
the
those.
the missing reel
Mm-hmm.
was an awesome little fake out in the Wii version.
Mm-hmm.
I know that doesn't exist anymore,
It
but I just thought that was
it's
hilarious.
not
It's like
it's not in the new
thank
one,
thank God we found these miniguns
right?
just lying around.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
you got to have the overpowered machine gun section.
yeah. Actually, the most overpowered thing in that entire game was the auto shotgun.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you get that and it's upgrade all the way, the just everything will die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the funny anecdote about that game is I assumed it would be something to introduce to non-gamer friends and get them to play with me. And every time I had made an attempt, people just couldn't get into it. So I never played it co-op,
Yeah.
unfortunately, because that's how I wanted to do it. And every time I tried, people weren't digging it for some reason.
You know what? If we ever meet up, we probably need to do that
Yeah,
then.
probably.
Just get dual keyboards,
Yeah,
typing of the dead.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm hoping they get to make more games like that because if that's where House of the Dead is going to go, I actually welcome them doing a lot more. If it's just going to take the piss out of itself with how absurd it is,
hmm
it can actually be a much more enduring game series.
Oh, yeah, but unfortunately, it doesn't really seem like Sega knows how to nurture their properties very well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
because they've got some great stuff they could dip into the back catalog and do sequels for. I would actually like to see like another Japanese take on the House of the Dead series in that same bizarre fashion that they previously did it.
Oh yeah, no, if they went like deliberately bizarro Japanese, that could be
hmm
hilarious.
Definitely.
All right. Yeah. But yeah, just awesome
Yes,
game.
definitely. Okay, do we?
Let's
Yeah, do we want to jump to another one?
let's go back to you because we both
Okay.
technically covered mine already.
Okay.
So
Well, I guess I will. Let's see. I will go ahead and do Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, which again was a more sort of overt, obvious sort of inspiration where after I finished the game, I'm like, I should probably try and ride a skateboard for real. And so I was 16 years old. I went to the local skateboard shop or whatever, West Side Skates in Lakewood, Ohio. And I think they're still there. They're in a different location. And I bought a skateboard and I took it home. And there was an empty lot across from my house, my parents' house where I lived. And I promptly fell and broke my arm. and I was working at what was known as Tops back then. Now it's Giant Eagle, like Midwest grocery store chain. And I had a shift that evening. And after I fell and broke my arm, I thought, well, I'm gonna be okay. Like that hurt, but I can go to work. And then like once it became really numb and I could hardly move it anymore, it was time to go to the emergency room, and I had to call off. And you know, put a cast on it, and didn't ride for a while, and then yeah, just never after that point. I went to like a skate park once, and was too timid to like do anything, and
no, actually, Tony Hawk Pro Skater like 2 and 3
mhm.
taught me I don't want to skateboard because the amount I bail
Mhm.
is like I'm going to like break my neck.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I've always been a pretty like reserved like indoor kid, I guess, right? So, uh, the sort of vain attempts I made at taking up skateboarding were sort of ill-fated, and I should have taken that breaking my arm right away as like a sign, and I kind of did, and yeah, it just never really took off for me. But I tried. I did eventually like learn to ride it at least, but I never was able to get past that huge hump of like learning to ollie, which is often pointed to as the most difficult thing. And yeah, without that skill under my belt, it was not to be.
Yeah, well, I wasn't really ever into skateboarding, but the Tony Hawk Pro Skater definitely gave me an appreciation for the people that do it, what goes into it.
Yeah, even though they're like totally over the top and not realistic at all. But
Yeah, yeah, like there's no one doing three turns, revert,
right,
ollie. Nobody does anything like that
no.
in pro skateboarding.
I guess I should say too, like Top Skater, the arcade game from Sega, was probably closer to the way I lived out that fantasy because, as I said, in actual reality, skateboarding wasn't something I could do. But that arcade game was really fun and gave you that sense a little bit.
Oh, there's just also something awesome about being able to be Spider-Man on a skateboard.
That is true, and they did go like even crazier with those cameos in later games. I think my favorite was. Uh, I actually think of Tony Hawk 4 as the best in the series, but by then people were starting to check out, and the,
They did like four more after that.
yeah, yeah. But for me, the fourth one is my favorite, and the unlockable character is Jango Fett, which is, I suppose, pretty like disappointing for people since it ought to be Boba Fett.
Boba.
Yeah, but he's still got the jetpack, and you can do one of his special moves infinitely, and basically fly out of the arena and just kind of view the level from a topographical map and just like glitch your way out and stuff. And it's kind of fun to just totally break the game with that character.
Really, without cheats.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they got over the top.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. The whole way the original series did it was basically like try beat your high score. It was just fun to go through the game over and over again with different characters
Mm-hmm.
because the way it was set up.
Yeah, it was like an old school arcade game basically. All of a sudden, scores mattered.
Yeah. And then they had to bury it into the ground, which Call of Duty is steadily going to go
Well,
into the grave that Tony Hawk built.
it's just taking it a lot longer for some reason.
I think it's because it's modern military. There's a
Yeah.
lot more fetishism of the military than there are of skateboarders.
Yeah, that's true. It's sort of a much bigger niche that they're going after.
Yeah, I do think that EA Skate seems like it sort of
Mm.
filled the void that Tony Hawk left.
Yeah, and I never got a chance to play those. I didn't get a PS3, which I didn't get a 360 until a couple years ago, but I didn't get a PS3 until 2009. And I just sort of read about those games and wanted to play them, and so I never got a chance to play them. I've been curious to go back, I just haven't done it.
Yeah, skate was more like real skateboarding. That was extremely difficult to do anything, but when you did it, you felt
Yeah,
awesome.
which that sounds really cool, actually.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's move on.
Yes.
That's all right.
Yep. Totally.
Uh, Inspiring, just Diablo, the original.
Yeah.
And I know that there's the big love for Diablo too, but for me, Diablo is like the atmosphere for that game was amazing.
Yeah. Now I've never played any of the Diablos because I was not a PC gamer, and we had like a crappy Packard Bell that didn't run anything until the early aughts, and by then I was sort of like my interest in games were waning at that point. So
Yeah, my dad was a programmer, so he was like he made sure we grew up with computers.
mhm.
Uh, just 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 that little thing on that. I really like the atmosphere and the music and a lot of things that Diablo did is really amazing combination of effects that made it a like really really memorable game. I still like can remember those old days like logging on to Battle.net and just playing online with varying people trying to get to Diablo.
Mhm. So the social aspect of it too was an important factor.
Oh yeah, just I liked playing online. Like that
Mhm.
was one of the first games where I really got to play with other people online.
Mhm. I never really heard anyone mention the atmosphere in that game as being such an important element of it.
Oh yeah, it was. It's what uh, caused the game to be so popular
Mm.
in the first place. Because I mean, if you look at it now, it's not that impressive looking. But back for where like games were around that time during the mid '90s.
Yeah. Well, I guess for me, since I was not a PC gamer, I instead played the Blizzard Super Nintendo game Blackthorn and really loved that. And there's another game that has really awesome atmosphere. Like I know it gets made fun of now because like it's so retarded. You're just like this buff dude in a white tank top, and you can hit. There's a button you can actually hit.
It's very heavy metal.
Yeah, exactly. It's super cheesy. I don't mind that about it personally. I think that gives it a certain charm these days. But it was kind of like Super Metroid, I suppose. This similar, although I didn't realize that at the time. There's probably similar reasons why I liked both of those games so much. Is that the sense of place in the ambient soundtrack and the sound design and yeah, just all of that stuff made you feel like you were in this alien world that had a cool atmosphere to it.
Yeah, Diablo was that it was the dungeon was always randomized, so it wasn't like you could memorize the layout of the game levels,
Mm-hmm.
and you didn't know what was behind every single door, and you had limited supplies. There was just a lot of, and the sound design. Design was really well done.
Yeah. I guess in terms of inspirational games, in a way, Diablo was very inspired by Rogue, which it seems to be a really popular reference point for games these days now. There's so many like games that aren't just roguelikes, but like games that incorporate that permadeath element and that sort of thing.
Well, one of the things Diablo had going on with it, which back when they actually made death penalties really nasty, was that if you died in Diablo, your gear was dropped there, and you would have to go back and get it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were surrounded by a bunch of really like nasty monsters, you had a hard time getting your gear back, and you would have to like figure out what you were going to do to get it.
Yeah. What would the strategy be in a situation like that?
Oh, if you were doing with multiplayer, you would
Okay.
have like one of your friends like come down, or sometimes you just have to abandon it.
Yeah.
Like that's one aspect that games have sort of shied away from, is that they don't ever want anyone to lose their gear, because apparently that's too frustrating for some people.
Yeah. And
But the thing about that is, if you have that built into your design, then there's actual ways gear that you can get that's about as good.
yeah.
So gear doesn't matter as much. Your character level does.
It sounds like the spirit of that game's design lives on in some way in the Souls games now. The way
Yeah, the darks and demons are that's close to this. Just absolutely. Actually, I'd argue they're more brutal,
yeah.
because the games are literally designed around killing you.
Mm-hmm.
If you die in Diablo, it generally was because something went wrong.
Yeah. Whereas in the Souls games, it's like required to learn.
Yeah. Surprised none of us put that up. I guess it's not actually inspiring. It's just Gaga MG. I actually beat Demon's Souls.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's another one I have to admit I've not played other than like for a few minutes. So it's on my list of shame. I have to get to it.
Not necessarily. I mean, that's one thing I put with gaming, is that I don't know. People should work more so on just enjoying games rather than trying to get through this giant like list of them.
No, I agree. It's just that it comes up so often, and I was so scared away from it initially because I heard how difficult it was, and I'm not good at video games. And
Yeah, no, it's like you might beat the first level then.
yeah, so I at
But
least need to try it, I guess. It might not be for
yeah.
me, but I need to try it. I actually found it brand new copy on the clearance rack at Target for $6 last year, so I had to pick it up. I just haven't really touched it yet.
Oh yeah, yeah. At least touch it, and then you'll play it, and then you'll die like 3 or 4 times in the same spot and probably stop.
Yeah. I think I'm having the same experience with the 2004 PS2 survival horror game Siren. I'm finally playing that right now, and it's so frustrating. I've played like an hour's worth of it, and I don't think I'm going to touch it again.
Oh yeah, yeah. Siren is, I wouldn't actually say more frustrating, more than it's just Siren is an obtuse
Oh,
game.
it's so obtuse, yeah. And I haven't even gotten to the section that everyone talks about, like the really, really obtuse puzzle that like involves freezing a thing or something like that.
Yeah, like you need to find a rag, wet
Mm-hmm.
it, and then leave in there so some other character can find it. And like, why would anyone ever do that?
Right. It's so insane. Yeah, I haven't even made it to that yet. Just the shit that it has you do up to that point, even so far for me, is I can hardly handle.
Oh, and when you find out why all this stuff is going on, it is actually kind of really stupid.
Hmm.
Do you care if I go into it?
You can go ahead and spoil the ending for me. That's fine. Yeah, if you
Okay,
want.
some alien basically crash landed down on, and the village was uh having a famine, so they
Hmm.
were starving. So this dead alien comes around, they start eating it like while it's still alive, and it screams, and that's what causes all this shit to happen.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
this is the secret ending, mind you. Like
Okay.
you have to go through all this crap to find that out, and it's like so dead alien screaming.
Well, I was just gonna say that's typical Team Silent, though, right? I mean, did they count those as like the can't canonical endings?
No, that is the canonical. That's the little epilogue scene. It
Oh.
shows you what was the cause, like after you go do everything. Yeah, no. I just find the if you've seen the endings, like it's kind of this warped, hilarious ending because just like rock music's playing and the main teenage character is like killing Shibito
Hmm.
with like a shotgun and a katana, and it's like something out of a completely different game
Yeah, that
tonally.
sounds like Rising Zan or something. Sounds like something like a fun action game.
Yeah, except you don't really get to do that. It's just the ending to the game.
Yeah. Um. Oh, there was a point. There's something I was gonna say. Oh, I was gonna say. With Silent Hill One, to me, the canonical ending is the worst one because I know that that game was heavily influenced by Jacob's Ladder, which Jacob's Ladder was heavily influenced by the short film.
Yeah, yeah. Team Silent visually aren't original at all.
No.
And some people and like don't get me wrong, I love Silent Hill, but
Hmm.
you have to like look at these things and go, no, they ripped these things off from all these American movies.
Yeah. No. I mean, Silent Hill Two I count as one of my favorite games of all time, and yeah, it's true. Like these things don't just come out of nowhere. Everything has like a reference point where it's in something that it's influenced by, right? So, um,
Well, yeah, it's that Team Silent was just like was dream this dream team that came into existence because they were basically just told, okay, we want something to compete with Resident Evil. We don't care what it is. And they were left alone to make what they wanted.
yeah, and that's often the story that you hear for these really seminal games, where yeah, it's a team that just no one cared about, you know.
Yeah, because if it's the team that the company cares about, they want to guarantee a profit,
Mm-hmm.
and then they'll ruin everything.
Yep. Yeah, it sounds so cynical, but that's definitely true.
I've worked in the games industry. I've worked in television development for like reality TV. So
Mm-hmm.
like it doesn't surprise me because the only time anyone because you get told to work on some of the stupidest shit ever because it's what the clientele wants,
Right.
and you have these things that you want to do, but you're not about to list them because you won't ever get to make them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like too depressing to think about.
No, it's that it's somewhat understandable because occasionally you do hear about the like Richard Kelly,
Mm-hmm.
the filmmaker,
Mm-hmm.
like people like that who get out to the point where they can make whatever they want on a budget, and they make Southland Tales.
Right. Some people shouldn't be given free reign.
Yeah, uh, it's like they're money people. How do they know the person that's going to give them the golden goose and the person that's going to give them Southland Tales?
Yeah, and that explains the major label attempt in the 90s to go after every damned indie band that even if it didn't even like make sense, they would chase them and then they sign them and then they put out one album that bombs and then they drop them.
Yeah, well, it's like because Nirvana,
Yeah,
that's what happened with Nirvana. We don't want to drop the next Nirvana.
exactly.
Man, so much copycatting going on with these things. It it's I'm not even really being cynical about it. It's just what happens.
Yeah. No, it's like I said, it sounds cynical, but yeah, I agree with you. I think it's truthful.
Yeah. Your turn.
Okay. I guess I will mention Rock Band. This is brief. I mean, it's just
Rock Band was a lot of fun. Made you feel like you were in one for a brief bit.
right.
So you looked down and saw your plastic instruments.
Well, that was the experience with Guitar Hero previously with guitars. And before I played Guitar Hero, I was a guitar player. I am still a guitar player. I'm a very mediocre one. I've never really taken lessons and never really, learned to break out of my, my sort of small amount of ability. But the thing is, a lot of people poo-pooed Rock Band and Guitar Hero at the time because, there's no real life payoff. You learn to press those 5 plastic buttons, but then what? You can't play a real guitar, and there's some truth to that. And after a while, when you reach, because there's a progression in those games where you start to get better at them, and you can play on the harder difficulties, and that becomes more satisfying. And then once you master that, you want to move on to the next difficulty. I myself reached a certain plateau where I was able to play a lot of the songs on the hardest difficulty on expert, but not all of them. And after a while, you just sort of hang it up and say, well, there's no real payoff here. There's just diminishing returns. Like there's no point.
Yeah. It's like that South Park episode.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, congratulations, you're both fags.
You are a fag. Yeah. I really like the way those guys have like taken ownership of the word fag.
Yeah. Well, words change in their meaning and their use and connotation.
Exactly. So anyway, once Rock Band happened and the drums were introduced, I became addicted to the drums because it felt more natural. It felt like the real thing more so. And
yeah, it was the closest to a real instrument in the entire set.
Yeah, exactly. And I can actually say that I learned how to keep a few, like, I learned how to play drums a little bit that way. And I can, to this day, like, not well, certainly. I play drums about as well as Justin Bieber. If you've ever seen him in interviews, like, try to state his relevancy by getting behind a drum kit, I play about as well as that dude. But the fact of the matter is, it did teach me some basics of drumming, so...
Well, he is an accomplished pop star, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, this is true. And I've been told that he actually does write his own songs and does know how to play guitar and stuff. I actually didn't know that until more recently, but
yeah, well, it's just he came about at a particular time in his life doing that, and the people told him, "Oh no, be more of a teeny bopper," and that's what he did. And now he's stuck with the image for the rest of his life.
Yeah, right. No matter how much he fights against it, yeah. He'll have like a reinvention at some point, I'm sure.
Maybe, yeah. He'll do the Miley Cyrus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he'll probably like go study transcendental meditation or something though.
Yeah, join the Church of Scientology, some shit like that.
Yeah, that probably already has happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, Rock Band inspired me to learn to play drums a little bit, and certainly invaded my dreams with floating cymbals.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Just a real quick one from my end then. Mirror's Edge. I just thought it was a very refreshing. The fact that someone could actually do something in the first person besides just shooting, to me, was awesome.
Did you play any other sort of first-person action-adventure games prior to that? Like, I mean, I know often Metroid Prime is stated as sort of a big influence in that realm.
Well, yeah, but
you are
even
shooting.
with, like, Metroid Prime, you're still shooting. The fact that... And I actually hate that they had any shooting in it, because it felt so diametrically opposed to what the game excelled at, which was running away from the people with the guns.
I know that's often sort of the big complaint that people draw.
Yeah. Well, Star Wars, they did that because, well, EA was like, shit, we gotta make sure this is profitable. Quick, put guns in it.
Yeah. It's sort of a half-hearted attempt, it seems, though, because the guns are not very essential in the game.
Yeah. Well, I just like the part I disliked the most was when you get to the very end of Mirror's Edge, and you're in this server room, and you have to take out all the servers. Like they have to all get gunned down.
Mm.
So a game that was entirely about escaping and running away sticks you in a room with a bunch of guys with guns, and you have to basically take them down and shoot down these servers.
Yeah. That sort of thing is definitely very frustrating.
Yeah.
I didn't have the patience to see that game all the way through. I played the first few hours or so. I personally found the controls and the way you navigate the spaces to be sort of frustrating. I always chalk it up to the fact that I'm just not good at video games because other people find enjoyment in things, and then I just hit a wall and get frustrated
Yeah.
with the thing.
Or in Mirror's Edge, you literally do hit a wall
Yeah.
and then fall to your death.
Yeah, it's true. I literally did. There's a section where you're inside of a building. I think you're supposed to go get some sort of confidential file or something like that off a desk, and then there's an alarm that goes off, and then soldiers start flooding the area. It's flooding the building, and the game is supposed to use like color cues to sort of tip you where you should be going. And I swear to God, I played that section like 25 times, getting killed every single time, and just could not for the life of me figure out where I was supposed to be going, and just literally couldn't
Yeah.
progress.
Yeah, I really did like it, but I will admit there are sections in the game that were uneven. I just thought was the times when like the game really did what it did well. It was like, this is why I hope for with different games that people can figure out how to give new kinds of experiences.
Hmm. Yeah, no, at its best, it did feel like a first-person platformer.
Yeah, and that's really impressive because most platforming sections in most first-person games are horrible.
Hmm. I always think of Turok for the N64.
Ah, yes, Turok. That's actually a really horrible game now, but it was kind of fun back when it first came
Yeah, it
out.
was a lot of fun. I loved it. I actually played it again this past summer and found that I had less, that I was able to get much less far into it than I was when I was younger, which, I guess isn't surprising, but um, I ended up just resorting to putting in cheat codes and getting all the guns and warping around at various levels and had my jollies with it and put it away after like an hour.
Yeah. And well, I guess let's go to another one on your list. If you don't mind me asking, you have TMNT. Which one?
I was
There's so
speaking.
many.
Yeah, I mean, I was speaking generally about the series. I'm gonna. Okay, we'll do that then. I was lumping Kung Fu or Spartan X for the NES, Ninja Gaiden for the NES, and Ninja Turtles the arcade game, Ninja Turtles the original NES game, Ninja Turtles the original arcade game, Turtles in Time. Yeah, all of those Ninja Turtles games at the time. All of those all of those ninja games that were so big in like the early 90s as a kid definitely influenced me to just think that ninjas were the coolest. And I did go so far as like wanting to learn to like wanting to take kung fu classes or whatever, or karate classes.
I have a much bigger respect for ninjas than I do samurai. Because when you really look into the history of them,
Mm-hmm.
samurais, much like knights,
Mm-hmm.
were dicks.
Yeah, it was all about this like really strict code that didn't.
Well, well, not only that, and both samurai and knights could do this. They could kill you and take your shit.
Mm.
Like, like a samurai could walk into your house, claim it for his own, kill you, and fuck your wife.
Yeah, that's the kind of power you want people to have, right? I
Yeah.
don't have a problem with that. I'm sure I deserve it.
bloody peasant.
Yeah, he's a different person from you or I. He's better.
And no, Ninja Gaiden is hard as hell, but really, really well. Actually, is influential on games because it was one of the first really cinematic-ish type ones,
Yeah.
where it had the where you would see a cinematic, you would play the level, and after you beat the level, you'd get another cinematic, and it kept going back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are really cool. Like they're actually still really cool if you watch those cutscenes.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I certainly never finished it as a kid, and I never did go back and finish it when I was older either. I've seen Let's Plays of it, and that's good enough for me. uh,
I've beaten it. The second form of the last boss is
mm-hmm.
ridiculous.
Yeah, there's certainly patterns to memorize, and you can do it, but the problem is when you're forced to go back to the very beginning of that last stage, that...
You have no, not only that, you had to do the last three.
Yeah, that's what I mean, yeah, the very beginning. Yeah, like 8-1 or whatever, yeah. Yeah, so it was pretty punishing. And, yeah, I think that's, again, to go back to like the Souls games, that's what people talk about when they compare the Souls games to like NES games. People are thinking about games like Ninja Gaiden and how...
At least the Souls games don't have birds that just pop out of nowhere and throw you down pits.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I think there's a distinction to be made between games that are punishing and challenging and games that feature like graphical and programming bugs that just make them more of an annoyance than they could be or should be. So yeah, ninja games were cool because ninjas were cool.
Ninjas rock your socks off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just, since you lumped a bunch together, I'll just say a lot of the Hideo Kojima games, like in particular Snatcher or the first Metal Gear Solid.
Mm-hmm.
Because especially with like Metal Gear Solid, the fact that like you have this game and its main theme is all about, nukes, like this very serious topic, and about how like screwed up things are with them.
Mm-hmm. I was gonna say, how do you feel about that theme, the way it's integrated when you look at it? When you look at it now, because when I was younger, I thought that was really cool that the game was attacking such a serious issue. When I think about it now, I find it a little heavy-handed. But do you think it still holds up in your view?
I feel that like, well, yeah, but there are movies that are a bit heavy-handed,
Mm-hmm.
but given its particular subject matter, it's not like it's a polit. It's not like it's just a political issue. I know nukes interrelate with politics, but it's the fact that it's this immensely destructive weapon that we do have,
Mm-hmm.
and how the heck do we deal with this?
Well,
Especially with the fact that if you look at a lot of the nuclear systems that have existed,
mm-hmm.
there's problems.
Oh yeah. Well, I was going to say it's a topic that's maybe even more relevant now than it was when the game came out.
Yeah. Well, I think that's, I guess, in the zeitgeist, yeah, but if you look and think about it, the fact that as soon as we created them, they became relevant and they became very important.
Yeah.
Period.
Right.
Because just even a couple of those go to the wrong place, like the world becomes a lot worse very quickly.
Have you? I forget the name of it now, but I haven't seen it myself. There's a documentary about the storing of nuclear materials and how that affects generations way into the future. Does it sound familiar at all? I wish I could tell you the name of it.
Yeah. Well, there's also, just as far as it goes, I mean, there's been comic books and movies that have also dealt with nukes in a very, very heavy-handed way. I mean, that's basically the main theme with Watchmen in the first place, was the fact that like will like what would you be willing to do to prevent like nuclear Armageddon?
Mm-hmm. Well, what I was gonna say about this particular documentary that I found interesting in terms of what I've heard about it. Like I said, I haven't seen it, but I think it gets into the idea that you have to, in terms of storing these, in terms of storing nuclear materials and nuclear waste, there has to be a thought process as to ensuring the safety of them way, way, way into the future, where it's uncertain what the languages will be that people will be using in the regions of the Earth that they are stored, so that it's very clear to people that might discover them and not know what they are, to like just like on a very basic fundamental level understand what they are and that they should avoid them. You know.
Yeah, that's actually kind of a scary thing to think about. The fact that, oh yeah, we forgot about this cache of weapons that can destroy the world,
Mm-hmm.
or at least society.
Yeah, because it doesn't go away. I mean, like there's like atomic half life or whatever, but yeah, these things definitely are around for a while in terms of.
Yeah, it's always going to be a serious topic
Mm-hmm.
until we can somehow figure out a way to deal with them. But I sadly don't think that's going to quite be in our lifetime. Maybe in the future, or just maybe when we leave Earth and we won't have to worry about the effects of them as much.
Yeah, once we completely nuke this planet and just totally fuck it up for everyone, then we can move on to Mars and start afresh.
Yeah. Wow, that we just like went to like the most depressing place. Once Earth's dead and a husk,
Well, you might have changed my
it's like
opinion.
the end of the Bug Planet in Ender's Game.
Mm-hmm. You might have changed my opinion about the way the topic is handled in Metal Gear Solid. Maybe a certain heavy hand is needed in this particular topic.
Well, it's just like the thing with it was just the fact that it was a game. It was one of the main things about it was that.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I'm not even sure how much he intends it to be, but I actually think it's interesting how the game does encourage, with the way it rates you, to not kill people.
Mm-hmm.
Like most of the time, you get like achievements and things for killing people. It's interesting to have a game series that sort of does the opposite.
Yeah, and it does, I suppose, pose interesting questions when you think about the idea that it gets into the whole genetic, like clone issue or whatever. Like, you know.
Well, yeah, well, that's one of the reasons why people actually remember Solid Snake, and I mean, most of the Call of Duty soldiers are just blank slates.
Mm-hmm.
Because Snake ultimately, and be it like him or Big Boss, they get screwed over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the other, like, that's the recurrent theme in those games, is you're just sort of a pawn.
Yeah, they're considered like the ultimate soldiers, but ultimately their lives are tragic.
Right. Because war is bad.
Yeah, well, that is definitely one of the big themes with Metal Gear.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's just the fact is, even with them, is that they're a part of war. War is part of who they are.
Right.
But war is also the thing that destroys them.
Yeah. Tragic irony.
Yeah. Of course, I don't necessarily know how much of it is because of what Kojima does and how much is because of what his like translators put into it. I guess that's why the first one was I like so much better, because they sort of left the guy who was translating it alone
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, and then Kojima got more actively involved with his later ones, and thus the crazier elements
Mm-hmm.
got left in, or just I don't know. There's some really weird dialogue in the Metal Gear games,
Mm-hmm.
which is just, as far as I can tell, it seems to be because Kojima's like, no, translate me word for word.
Yeah. Which, as we know, doesn't really work in terms of localization.
Yeah, just the naming scheme for all the Metal Gear games it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Twin Snakes is a stupid name.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, the thing.
Punishing Snake is a stupid name.
Yeah. Well, the thing everyone always brings up is the fact that they're just so, like, sexual.
I guess punishing Snake you could drive to sadomasochism
Mm-hmm.
or masochism, but even within that, yeah, I definitely get with the liquid or solid or that just gets to eerie territory.
I
All right, let's move
okay.
on.
Yeah, let's just
This is going to an even darker
yeah
place.
probably ignore those particular themes at this moment.
No, actually, no, actually, we want to stay dark. Let's go Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah. Okay. So we both have this on our lists. I guess for me, it was such a big deal because it was the first time I realized that you could get really caught up in the story in a game. I actually didn't play 6 or 3 prior to this one, so I understand that there's definitely a story that people get really caught up in that one.
Yeah, I view that actually six was better written.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes any
And
sense.
I think
I
probably a lot
mean,
of people
what's
would agree
the
with that.
most? Ask most people, what's the story of seven? I don't think most people remember.
No, it's so convoluted. Yeah, I haven't replayed it since I was a teenager, so I couldn't tell you at this point.
Okay, basically, I don't think some people realize it. The Sephiroth in the game, outside of the Nibelum flashbacks,
Mm-hmm.
and even then those are lies, is a ghost, is a phantom.
Hmm.
He's in the North Pole. That's why you have to bring like the dark materia to him, because that's his actual body.
Mm-hmm.
So you're fighting this specter throughout the entire game. And most people don't even realize that. They just go, oh yeah, Sephiroth's around and doing crazy shit. It's like, no,
Huh. I probably did miss that because yeah,
Cloud's insane.
right.
That's actually the point of the game. Cloud thinks he's Zack throughout the vast majority of Final Fantasy
I
VII.
do remember that. Yeah,
Yeah.
isn't that like a side quest though to discover that?
No, that's part
Okay.
of the main game.
Okay.
That's what, like, they have this crazy thing where Cloud and Tifa go into the live stream and then they're going through his head.
Right. Okay, I remember
Yeah,
that part because I remember there being like a flashback sequence that involved uh, Cloud and Zack sort of in the same scene, and
yeah,
that's when you discover that he sort of took that persona.
yeah. Well, I also just put it down too, and this is something that you have to have been Japanese or really into anime to understand. Um, I call it the Evangelion effect
Mm-hmm. The game often
because
gets compared
things,
to that.
well, because they even have the Type 2 armament in it. And as far as RPGs go, like the Wild West one that came out around the same time, like 1996,
Wild Arms?
Wild
Yeah.
Arms. The Japanese script for Wild Arm actually has shit tons of references to Evangelion.
Mm.
So,
So tell me exactly what the major points of reference are, since I never experienced Evangelion.
okay, well, basically, Evangelion was sort of like Watchmen, and I don't mean that just willy nilly. And that was this really influential work. I mean in that it was a deconstruction of like the giant robot genre,
Okay.
and people usually throw that around for a lot of things, but in this
Mm-hmm.
particular case, it was in that the main character didn't want to be a giant robot pilot. Usually, it's that I will be a pilot for the greater good. Like there's the Amuro Ray type characters. If you know anything about Gundam,
No,
okay,
I am completely oblivious to anything and everything anime. So
okay, okay. I'm going back and further. Basically, the usual archetype for a lot of mecha pilots are they're these very giving, heroic kind of guys. Well, Evangelion, and it's usually like some sort of father gives his son a giant robot, and he goes out and saves the world.
okay.
Ava was basically the reverse of all of that, in that the main character was this psychologically damaged kid because, well, he's having to fight this war that the adults around him basically are throwing him into.
Mm-hmm.
And it just had all these really weird, crazy ass head trippy type stuff. Like you went into the character psychology, and one of the points about it was sort of that everyone in the series was kind of horrible human beings.
Okay.
Of course, that's what made them interesting. And
Right.
actually, apparently, the creator didn't like that people liked a lot of the characters.
Sort of.
Goes to show Arthur Theorem.
Yeah. I was gonna say it makes me think of All in the Family. The
Yeah.
way you know people just liked Archie Bunker and the person that made
Yeah,
the show.
even though he was a homophobic
Hmm.
asshole.
Yeah, and the person who made the show was liberal and wanted the character to be sort of a straw man. Yeah.
It's funny how that works.
Right.
I guess it's Poe's law in effect.
Right.
But yeah, but okay, long roundabout thing. That was the effect on as far as I can tell on Final Fantasy VII with its writing and its creation.
Hmm.
So in the case of Final Fantasy VII, think about it. Final Fantasy VII is basically the story about a person who's pretending to be someone they're not.
Hmm.
Geez, I wonder if that sounds like anyone that might be playing the game, especially if you're Japanese.
Right. A role playing game about role playing. How meta.
Yeah, it's like it went super meta, basically,
Hmm.
as far as I can tell with the writing of it. And so the plot the overall plot of the game is basically about Cloud realizing that he's not Zack, this heroic, idealized person of him. He's still himself, and he accepts who he actually is by the end of it.
Right.
And then he can save the world and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So killing Sephiroth at the end of the game is very symbolic, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. It's if you think about it, he does it inside his head. That's what
Right. Yep.
happens. That's as far as I can tell what that entire cinematic when Cloud like because you see Cloud, it's like wait, it's not over, and then he just faints.
Hmm.
Then it's just Cloud going through all these weird like barriers. He's going in deeper into his head, and there's that element of Sephiroth that was controlling him throughout the entire game, and he defeats that, and that's the end of the game.
Yep.
He has an internal battle at the end, and that's what the game, as far as I could tell, was really about.
All right. Well, you've given me a new insight into the themes of Final Fantasy VII. I have to tell you.
Oh, and another thing with it, and this is what the sequels kind of ruined, was the fact that it's it has the whole eco message to it. Well,
Right.
the point with Holy was that Holy is going to like get rid of Sephiroth and everything that the Earth considers bad.
Right.
Well, that might include humanity.
Right. Right.
Because we've done things like build the Mako reactors and suck the life force out of the planet. So does the planet care about us or not?
And then you get that epilogue scene with Red 13 and his family.
Yeah, and it's just this. It's Midgar empty
Hmm.
and abandoned. So is it abandoned because everyone got wiped out and just naturally claimed, or did people abandon Midgar and move about?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure humanity has been wiped out. Is the implication there?
Well, possibly. It's just saying that it was a very open ending that I just thought that was really neat.
Yeah.
And I don't see too many people talk about these aspects of the game, and that kind of
Well,
annoys me.
well, it's probably because people don't pick up on them though. Because, like I said, I've never heard that until just now, and as I said, I never like revisited the game. So, uh, you're telling me this is the first I've heard it, and it makes a lot of sense. But
Well, it's just to me, it's weird because all of it's in the script. Like like at one point, Claude literally just says he went insane. Oh, and he also has sex with Tifa, which is another thing that's sort of slightly glossed over.
I can't remember this. When does this happen?
It's like right near the end. It's heavily it's implied heavily.
Okay.
So I just always put that. Yeah, he actually did because Tifa was more the actual girl. Aerith is more the fantasy
Right.
type girl.
She's the Tifa's the one you want to have sex with, and Eris is the one you want to marry.
Yeah, it's just sort of, or actually, it's more so Tifa was the actual like girl that like he grew up with
Hmm.
and could have an actual relationship with, whereas Eris is this idealized, almost spherical. I'm not saying the right word.
Uh, s
Ethereal,
oh, okay.
ethereal like woman. She's this seemingly perfect.
Hmm.
You know, I guess it's that I'm really into like anime and Japanese culture, so I pick up on some of these things.
Yeah. Yeah, that was definitely not my perspective. So, I mean, I flirted with being into anime, but never really was. And to this, and nowadays, I just like have no time for it. but
Yeah.
I can see how that would probably give you more insight into what the game was trying to say.
Yeah. Just there was a lot that Final Fantasy tried to say. I don't actually know how well it translated over,
Mm-hmm.
but it did aim for a lot. I just thought it was interesting and in depth, and yeah.
Well, I'll say this about it as someone who didn't pick up on what the game was going for. Um, I guess I had a similar experience with it as I did with like Akira, which I thought was just really original and unique and striking. And maybe I wasn't
And you had no idea what was going on.
pretty much, yeah. I mean that like I certainly felt emotional when Eris died. May even have shed a tear if I'm being honest, like most people did or whatever. So I guess and that sort of was a very different thing at the time, realizing that games can tell stories that are effective.
Yeah, on an emotional level, and
Mm-hmm.
not just about getting a high score or that kind of stuff. Yes, yes. Unfortunately, it seemed David Cage played that took the wrong note. Oh, sad. Sad is what everyone likes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah, David Cage definitely played that game. Um, I will say on a similar level, I think that you've mentioned you're not the biggest fan of like these short flash-based games that like seem to have a emotional message behind them or something.
Well, it's not that they aren't
Mm-hmm.
interesting. It's that there seems to be the people that are making these short 5 minute things that are kind of cute
Yeah.
seem to somehow think, they condemn the AAA devs for not somehow making this 5 minute thing into an 8 hour thing,
Mm.
if that makes any sense.
Well, yeah, it can't be done realistically.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, you will have like your outspoken, pretentious, artsy fartsy type indie devs, I suppose, but I don't think that they're really trying to accomplish the same things if they're being honest with themselves. I mean,
Yeah. It's like, mainstream films don't necessarily try to accomplish the same thing as some indies do. In
mm-hmm.
fact, a lot of my favorite independent films are usually the ones that try doing the bigger budgety type stuff, like freaking El Mariachi. I mean, that was
Mm,
basically just being a low budget version, which of a film that ended up being Desperado, which was
right,
the high budget version.
right. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I guess I feel differently. I think I hear what you're saying because El Mariachi is a really fun movie. I guess I like it when. I mean, there's room for both. I guess is what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
uh, when a thing.
Yeah, no, my issue isn't that that these cute little things can't exist. It's when somehow the expectation, why aren't you doing what I'm doing?
Yeah,
But you're not them. Don't tell another artist necessarily what to do unless like you're actually working with them.
yeah, exactly. It's really just not fair because you don't know what their goals are, and it, what a boring world it would be if everyone won.
Yeah, yeah. If we all had the same kind of game, like don't get me wrong, I love Mirror's Edge,
Mm-hmm.
but if every first person game was a parkour sim, that would get boring really fast.
Right. Yeah, I enjoy a good first person shooter. And I also enjoy a well done 5 minute flash game.
Yeah.
Um,
That's my issue with things like Call of Duty and the like. It's not that they exist, it's that they become too ubiquitous, and then it's just like,
right.
was it space? There needs to be like room for the brain to breathe with some of these things. Otherwise, we can't shift through things.
Exactly. And that's why we talk about palate cleansers.
Yeah. Yes, we just compare. Yeah, we just compared Call of Duty to flushing toxins out of the body. Sounds about right.
Yeah, well, let's leave it at that then.
All right. You.
Okay, well, I was trying to get to basically the game Every Day the Same Dream, which came out a few years ago. It's like another one of these 5 minute flash games. I didn't have it on my list, but I'll bring it up real briefly. for me was inspirational because it's basically a game that's all about like middle class office worker existential ennui. Um, and it sounds really pretentious, and it is, I guess. But for someone who was like, a desk jockey for a while, it spoke to me because, as I said, I tend to connect with things that are sort of depressive or depressing. I don't think that's a word. And
Depressing is a word.
depressing, not depressive. I think I said.
Okay.
So the game, but what's good about the game, I think, is the fact that it through the gameplay, it echoes this theme of like sort of the redundancy of everyday life. So you move to the right, and you and the camera pans out and you see every person. It's a little heavy-handed, but it's for a 5-minute thing. What can you do? And the camera pans out and shows you everyone working at their desk exactly. And then you wake up the next day and you do exactly the same thing. You press right on the keyboard and it's the same thing. There's very little gameplay in it per se, and that sort of thing has been appropriated by tons of other Flash games, and I think to less of a good extent, or to less effect. But I just liked the way the game echoed that theme through its gameplay, and I don't know. It reminded me actually of the film The Seventh Continent, which kind of deals with similar themes, where it's basically it just has these recurrent shots and motifs that get across this idea that life can be very mundane and repetitive, and for some people, they can't stand to live that life, and so they take their own life, and that's what that game's about. And that's what that film's about. And I don't know. It spoke to me. I'm not saying I'm killing myself. I'm just saying I get that sentiment, and I'm glad that there's things out there that
Well, at least the
speak to those
nukes
themes.
will kill us all then.
What's that?
At least the nukes will kill us all by the time we get that bored.
Yes, I'm waiting for like some outside force to do it for me.
See, and I know this will be kind of redundant with some of the yes. After redundancy, I'll talk about how something's slightly redundant with a lot of things because I don't know. I guess I just as I said, I like story, character, and that kind of stuff. Yeah, the Gabriel Knight series is one of my favorite games. I've replayed through them several times.
Yeah, again, I've played so few adventure games because I wasn't a PC gamer growing up, so I've missed this series myself. I understand. Again, it's another series that has a lot of love, and it's another adventure series that has that really infamous puzzle in it.
Yeah, 3 has one of the most like what kind of ridiculous logic? Why would anyone do this?
Mm-hmm. But okay, so yeah, what is it that you love about them then?
I like just the character and the way, especially just the amount of research that was done into things like voodoo, or the second game is all about like Ludwig, King Ludwig, like the second,
Okay.
and all the castles he built, and just it's just crazy the amount of research and the way that they tied historical events into the fiction of the game. So the world became this very like believable, like this could have actually have happened
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. Actually, the third one's kind of interesting because all the Dan Brown Da Vinci Code stuff, or like their Christ actually does have an error,
Mm-hmm.
like that actually was the plot of the third Gabriel Knight game, only it makes more sense in my opinion and doesn't involve Da Vinci somehow leaving all these really elaborate clues
Hmm.
in his paintings for whatever reason.
It has to be better than the Dan Brown book.
It was
Yeah.
in that you're actually working for the people who are descended from Christ, like to find their little baby.
And I'm guessing it did it before that book was released.
Yeah, it did it before the Da Vinci Code, and it actually did it like at least storyline wise did it better
Mm-hmm.
because you actually you find out the origin of the Schottenjägers and basically uh, the Schottenjägers the entire line start because the Roman soldier who executed Christ was asking Jesus for forgiveness, and so he gave his entire family line the burden of hunting down the darkness and the shadows.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess I didn't realize the extent to like the historical aspect of those games.
Yeah, well, it's just I like things especially when they were really well written, and it was just the fact that you actually go around talk to people and it's just the character of Gabriel Knight is actually the entire point of him is that he's kind of actually a horrible person, at least at the beginning of the game. Like they make mentions that he sleeps around with a lot of women and it's just kind of this your assistant Grace Nakamura, who of course she loves you but she never will never admit that she actually has feelings for Gabriel,
Mm-hmm.
has just all these things about all these women that she's involved with, and that he just basically used people for the vast majority of his life. And his family is he's the last of the line of his particular family of the Ritters. And so the entire series is sort of about him growing up, as it were,
Nice.
maturing. And he does change as the series goes along. I mean, he's still kind of the adventure game type of character where you do horrible things to people, like steal their stuff or whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
but in the lines of the greater good.
Yeah. Well, that does sound appealing to me because here we were talking about the influence of uh, the mythology. Oh God.
Yeah,
Um,
like I make the argument that it's a much better implemented version of the whole idea of the Slayer from Buffy the Vampire
mm,
Slayer, because there's a lot more research into history, how it was done. Like there's the Schottenegger library, and all the previous Schottenegers all had journals that they wrote out. So you actually throughout the games go back to them and reference older cases they had done. And they have books relating to vampires, werewolves. It's pretty cool.
hmm. Yeah, that Buffy is another thing I'm oblivious to. I might have to watch those at some point though because my girlfriend's a big fan, so she might at some point force me to watch them. But
Yeah, Buffy, I don't know how well it's aged. It was fun to watch in the 90s. I know this is sacrilege in nerd culture because Joss Whedon apparently is God to some people.
apparently, not to
Yeah,
me.
but no, not you. But I always felt that Angel is actually a better implemented series because Angel was about redemption and loss, whereas Buffy, she doesn't really lose any of her close friends throughout the entire series.
Mm-hmm.
Like people die in the series, but she basically all the major friends that support her at the start of the series, she has by the end.
Mm-hmm.
So she doesn't really lose much as the series goes by. She's more of what I would refer to as she was a vicarious character.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't have very many identifiable traits because
Mm-hmm.
she's supposed to be basically the female audience proxy because Joss Whedon and his feminism stuff.
Right. Yeah.
You want to make a no nonsense, sassy kind of female character.
Right.
That's what he did.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess if you want to have that sort of fantasy wish fulfillment experience with it, then giving her a lot of identifiable characteristics might, not help with that.
Yeah. And I'm not even going to call it bad writing because they obviously intended to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, congratulations, you figured out what you want to give your audience, and you gave it to them. So,
Yeah, nothing wrong with
I
that,
I
really.
have a love hate with Joss Whedon, so
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
I have mostly an obliviousness and a complete befuddlement. My major, uh, like, what I know about Joss Whedon is mostly what saw in the Avengers movie, and I just did not enjoy that movie. I didn't get it, you know, like, um, so it's just,
Oh, sacrilege.
hey, I know,
Kill the infidel.
I know. I mean, I'm not. That's the other thing. I don't really like superheroes. Like, I'm not a comic book guy, so I have no affinity for superheroes inherent in my being, and uh, I'm up for liking a comic book movie. I mean, I like the Batman movies. I like the Tim Burton ones. I like the new ones. I liked the Spider-Man movies, at least the first two. Um, so I don't know, but the Avengers did not connect with me whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you never were into comics, it's the closest thing to an action comic, which I guess is why all the fans really liked it,
Yeah,
because it's like, oh, this is like watching a comic book.
yeah. I guess that's not like an ideal for me. You know, it's like, well, I
Yeah.
want to watch a good movie. I didn't get that.
Oh, you're gonna so much hate mail from
I
that.
don't care. There's gonna be like 10 people that listen to this anyway. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like David Cage, I like the Avengers. It was emotional. Okay, your turn.
um, I guess I think I mentioned on my list I had like Eco. I had Mario Paint. Um,
Yeah, Ecos. I thought the entire Ecos, just all the games by that team were
right.
really amazing.
Oh, for sure. And I'm still sad about the fate of Last Guardian. Like, I don't.
Is that actually going to come out? Because they keep saying it is,
They
but
do keep saying it, so it's very confusing because it really doesn't seem that way, you know. But
especially because it was supposed to be a PS3 game, and
now it's a
like,
PS4 game, apparently. I think.
yeah,
Yeah. I don't know. I don't get it. My theory is that everyone who speculated on the outcome of the game being that you would have to, like, you know, that your pet gets killed, or you have to kill it yourself, and it's like a dramatic moment. Everyone was speculating that, and I feel like maybe these people might have nailed it, and the director realized that and went, "Oh shit, we get."
to me, I think that's actually one of the worst things you can do as a writer or creator
Mm-hmm.
is go, oh crap, they figured out. I better change it because people figured it out.
Yeah,
Because you've built the entire, presumably assuming you planned it out enough, you've built the entire game about leading to that moment.
mm-hmm.
So to then cop out of it is like you're sabotaging yourself before you've even started.
In a sense, but if you are rethinking the whole thing and throwing everything out and just keeping a few, like, say, the core mechanics and the graphics engine or something, and going from there, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you look at something like, say, Resident Evil 4, which they went back to the drawing board at least a couple times, and it ended up being like a hugely influential, really great game. And so maybe if you have the budget and you have the time, maybe there's something to be said for scrapping a thing when you don't think that it could really live up to your
Yeah.
expectations.
Yeah, ultimately, we don't know what the hell's going on with it,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it could have all just been on track and just got sidetracked because the guy left Sony and they're trying to, or I don't know, or maybe he's stuck on figuring out a couple things and it's just really difficult.
Could be.
Sometimes that happens.
Yeah, and he is one of those game designers that gets to do that, I suppose. So,
Well, he, at least as far as critical acclaim goes, he's kind of earned the right to do
hmm
that.
exactly. So I guess I'll just mention that Eco, like, I mean, there's nothing I could say that hasn't been said, but like, in terms of inspiration, it was an inspiration for a Halloween costume a few years ago.
Oh, did you go, what's his name? The horned boy.
Right, I actually don't remember his name either, which is sacrilege considering I'm a fan enough to have dressed up as him. But um, yeah, it turned out pretty good, I thought. I will say I went to a bar that night and a drunk asshole pulled on my horns, which were precariously velcroed to a sweatband underneath some gauze, and yeah, so I was not very happy about that because he totally like screwed him up. And then
Wow, just like in the game, people were dicks to you. horns.
Yeah, I was ostracized because of my horns, even on Halloween night. Um, in a weird twist of fate, he dropped his credit card and was not aware of it, and I found it. And I had that, like this moment to sort of decide what to do. And I guess I chose Paragon instead of Renegade to put the nerd.
Well, you
Uh,
you gotta be careful with that because if you do, like, you can get arrested for that shit.
oh, I know. I wasn't about to like go commit credit card fraud, but I suppose I could have charged some of my drinks to his thing and convinced the bartender that he wanted to get my drinks for being a jerk to me earlier or something. But no, I didn't do it. I should have, maybe in retrospect.
Yeah, well, there's. I think everyone always has the moments where, like, God, I should have just been a dick because
Hmm.
I fucking hate that asshole.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I don't know why I was as nice as I was.
Yeah. Actually, I'll just stop. I'll not mention Phantasm. I should just put all my Sierra games into a giant,
Mm.
like, list. Um, the original Resident Evil.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one too. I didn't mention it, but
Just because that was new type of experience, like, and really, like, just the sensation that, like, oh crap, I have to manage my ammo and even saves. And that's one of those things that, like, does kind of take the tension out because when if you can just quick save, you really can't lose anything.
yeah, and not only that, there's a resource bound in that as well with the ink ribbons.
Yeah.
So you really have to think about it.
Yeah, oh yeah, and just the fact that, like, you had to select what you were going to take with you, including the actual items.
Hmm. Did you play Sweet Home at all? I mean,
I've
certainly
played
you
I've
didn't.
played I've played the ROM of it a
Right.
bit, but I didn't necessarily beat it just because it was so back in the day, and the interface for that game isn't necessarily very good.
No. I've
Because you're managing four characters with just like two buttons.
right. Yeah, I did go back to it some years ago on a ROM, and it didn't really connect with me. I think I found the same thing you're describing. Is I found it to be a little obtuse in terms of the interface and stuff. And
Yeah, well, that's why it's like I don't expect people to get back into the old Sierra adventure games because I grew up with those. So
hmm the sort of there's another those games were very punishing, with the weird ways you could die and stuff.
yeah, Sierra was basically we need to sell guidebooks, so we're going to make it so there's all these dead ends, and some of them you won't even realize about until like you're 8 hours in.
Yeah.
Actually, I think Gabriel Knight was good in that regard. There wasn't nearly as many ways you didn't die. You couldn't really die that often in Gabriel Knight, and you also, like, the game made sure that you got a hold of all the stuff you needed before you let you progress. So you couldn't, like, oh, you didn't pick up this item on day 3. Guess what?
Yeah, that stuff's never fun.
Yeah.
I did play a little bit of King's Quest uh 6, I want to say.
Yeah, that's the really popular one.
Okay, yeah. Um had some fun with that. I didn't finish it. I played my dad and I played it. Um my dad and my mom divorced when I was 1 year old, and so like at home at my mom's house we didn't really ever have any computers, but my dad did. So like what little computer games I did play, I played with him on the weekends, and
Yeah. That
that was
that
one of
was
them.
actually kind of a dick game because if you didn't have the instruction manual, like, you actually couldn't figure out some of the puzzles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely felt like we were hitting our heads against the wall with that one occasionally, for sure.
That's probably why,
Yeah.
because you probably didn't have the instruction manual.
Probably not. I don't seem to remember having it now.
Yeah, I guess real quick I'll just mention Phantasmagoria because that was also one of my first introductions to horror type games.
Mm.
Ironically, it was actually scary, I think, because we played it censored.
Mm.
So all the time there was blood going on the screen, like, my imagination filled in the blanks. It was like the most horrible thing ever. Then
Right.
I, like, several years later, played the uncensored version, and it's like comical. You can tell that they're dummies that they're using.
Yeah. That is a game I'm curious to play now because it just seems so cheesy.
It's cheesy, but actually it's one of the most messed up games.
Yeah.
Like because and this is the thing I find weird with it because it was written and directed by a woman.
Right.
And the entire game boils down to the main character being is kind of an idiot. She unknowingly unleashes this demon that possesses her husband, and then he becomes this abusive asshole. He even rapes her during the game.
Mm.
And like this is a cinematic that they show at the start of one of the chapters.
So maybe some of this like accidental misogyny from a woman, sort of innate in her being, just comes out.
Well, it's just I'm amazed because yeah, if you looked at that like if you looked at that in a game, like if a guy had that as his plotline, like you get labeled a sexist like that. I'm just amazed that like Roberta Williams, like amazing designer because I mean they made a game company, one of the most successful game companies around. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't go on a business; they got bought out, and they just decided to go for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually what seemed to ruin Sierra.
Yeah. The loss
Was
of
them?
Roberta.
No. The Roberta and Ken Williams sold the company to I forget who. It was one of those companies that got bought out
Yeah.
later on by Activision.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, but Sierra, it's just I'm actually thinking amazed that Phantasmagoria got made. I don't think you could almost make it today because with the way previews work and how reactionary people are to things. I mean, if people found out there was I mean, there's a fake in the confines of the fiction rape scene in Hotline Miami 2, and that's controversial.
Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that. I haven't played through that game yet. I don't know what I'm waiting for exactly, but I was not aware of a rape scene.
No, no one is, and I guess this is why I find some of these things that are going on to be kind of absurd because I can think back to games yesteryears. And in some ways we're more conservative than we were back in the day. Back in the day, people could make almost whatever the hell they want to because there wasn't as many business interests controlling the content of everything in order to maximize sales. There was just, oh, games make money. And there were small teams of people. I think maybe like 40 people made Phantasmagoria. That includes the actors.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say there's a certain element of going back to the drawing board or sort of wiping the slate clean that happens every so often in games, probably. Whereas because it is only finally gaining some traction as like a mainstream medium, uh, we do sort of forget our history more easily because it's like older games aren't seen unless they're really influential, especially like going back to like NES and Atari 2600 and stuff. But um, I feel like there's a certain element of sort of not learning lessons from older games
Yeah.
that happens now.
Well, the thing about it, though, I mean, Phantasmagoria was actually covered in the news. I do remember seeing it
Yeah,
being listed. But ironically, it was more so for the violence
right.
that was in it. And don't get me wrong, there are these scenes where you go and these ghosts basically recreate the murders. Like you look into a mirror and suddenly the ghosts are recreating the murder that happened because the demon possessed the magician named Karnov before and he killed all of his previous wives.
Hmm. Not the Karnov from Karnov, the Data East game.
Yeah. Or no, his name oh yeah, it was Karno.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, but basically like the entire thing like, torture mutilation, the entire game is like because it's character based and it's not just mechanic based. All the violence in the game is like it's really brutal
Mm-hmm.
for like what actually happened. Not necessarily the whole like they use fake dummies, but like one of his wives he like feeds to death. Like he just stuffs like food down her throat to the point where she chokes to death.
Mm.
Another one, he straps in this device and like he twists her head around so her head pops.
Oh, that's pretty gruesome.
Yeah, yeah. Just other ones like he smashes. I'm surprised I remember all of these.
I'm not.
That goes to
It's not.
show
I.
how
It sounds like they're traumatic. Probably. No, I don't know about that.
well they in part were because I was a kid playing. I was like I think at 13 or 14 playing this,
Hmm.
and as I said, it had the censorship on, so it seemed a lot worse than it was. There one like he jams a wife's head like her eye socket through the top of a bottle, and the ball like ball head breaks off, and she's just dead.
Oh
Then
God.
you and then if you look later, you can find that her corpse is actually like in one of the wine barrels.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like, and this was written and directed by women. It's all about how his husbands brutally murder their wives, and
Well, it does make me think of the Lifetime original movie syndrome, where every one of those things is all about, a battered woman.
yeah, it's I don't know. I guess I find it funny given there all these decries of the want stronger female characters in games being written by women, and one of the like prime examples of a game that was created entirely by a woman, directed by a woman, and where women had complete control was all about a man beating the living, like trying to murder his wife.
Yeah. Well, there's probably a certain element of, even if it was on an unconscious level, she probably was trying to tap into ideas and themes that were more, uh, strange to say, palatable to a general audience. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
and that's all sorts of what does that say about us? Where this is what Roberta Williams decided that oh yeah, battering wife, that's a good idea for a game.
yeah, right. So yeah, there's probably a certain amount of like women, even if it's unconscious, like you know, doing things that are misogynistic or sexist in their works, if they're not thinking very carefully about creating like whatever you want to call it, like post-feminist or post-sexist works or something.
Oh, who the hell knows? All I know is that at least for it was just because of like the sheer balls to make Phantasmagoria.
Oh, totally. Yeah, you mentioned it was a big deal in the news at the time, and I remember that much at least. And yeah, it was. Well, I
Well,
mean,
like I still remember a lot of things about it, even though like you look at it now and it's it's people are green screened under or just green screen live action actors green screened in front
mhm.
of this like now crappy looking CG house.
It was George Lucas before George Lucas did it.
Yeah, yeah, they influenced George Lucas.
Yeah,
That's where he got the whole idea of it.
yeah.
Cool. Let's see. RBI baseball. I don't even remember that game.
Well, the reason I mentioned it is because I played it with a neighbor who was my babysitter on NES. It was um, I forget what they're called in Japan, but it's a very popular baseball series in Japan, with the sort of like super deformed characters with the big heads and squat little bodies. Um, and at the time when I played it, I thought that that was sort of a normal interpretation of characters in a game. And for one, the game was really fun. I really enjoyed it, and I rarely enjoy sports games. But at the time I hadn't really played many games at all, so I didn't really have a taste when I was 6 years old or whatever. But yeah, my neighbor played baseball himself, and the two uh, the two of us would play it while he babysat me, and then we would occasionally like play catch and stuff, and he would give me pointers about baseball, and I played for Little League at the time too, so it all sort of fed into my at the time my certain sort of appreciation I had for baseball, which ended up leaving me very shortly after that. But while I was at least playing Little League, I was interested in it, but I also really enjoyed the character designs of the baseball players in that game, and sort of wondered why baseball games going forward didn't do that. And then I sort of realized that it was a Japanese game, and they sort of adapted it to American audiences, and the whole like super deformed characters never were to be a popular thing in America, at least.
Yeah. Let's see. I'll truncate this down. I'm not going to bother with Chrono Trigger because I'll just go into what I think probably is my favorite game. Parasite Eve.
Hmm. Parasite Eve is your favorite game, you're saying?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Like I don't even necessarily know why because it came out like at least in the US it came out in 1998, which is if you know anything about all the games that came out the year, that's like Half-Life, StarCraft, like all these a lot of these really high influential games came out that year.
Yep. Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah, Metal Gear Solid one, which is never one of my favorites. But yeah, no, Parasite Eve is just uh, is that it's a really cool, interesting RPG. It represented where RPGs could have gone, but SquareSoft and the JRPG community just decide not to go in that
Mm-hmm.
direction
Mm-hmm.
because, well, the storyline for it's kind of sci-fi. I realize it's kind of schlocky because it's about sentient mitochondria trying to take over the human race or kill us off. Or
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a little goofy sounding.
yeah, it was, but like it was actually them. SquareSoft wanted to appeal to the Western market, and Parasite Eve was sort of their first attempt to do so.
Yeah.
Ironically, I think they're most successful because the game was very cinematic focused. It was like right after what they did right after Final Fantasy VII,
Mm-hmm.
and as far as I can tell, it's what the creator, put all the ideas that they didn't use in Seven into Parasite Eve because originally Final Fantasy VII was actually going to be a game where you're playing as a detective in New York,
Right.
and that's what you actually play as in Parasite Eve. In fact, if you look at Aya Brera, she's actually basically the actual female version of Cloud Strife,
Mm-hmm.
unlike Lightning, which is just some weird 13. I'm not even going into. I could fill a whole 2 hour podcast on everything that's wrong with 13.
Yeah.
But Parasite Eve just actually had some of the more nuanced and more in depth characters. Just and the pacing behind the game because the game isn't just non-stop like constantly going through like an area and killing monsters and leading to like a cutscene or whatnot. The game actually had like after you dealt with a boss, the game would have just these story segments that you would be going through and talking to people,
Yeah.
and that
Exactly.
would lead to the next big action sequence that would happen. So the pacing, in my view, is I don't know why more games haven't bothered to do that because after people do a boss, it is kind of nice to have a downtime.
Yeah. I guess unless you're Treasure, then you just want as many bosses as possible.
Yes, but that's because you're treasure and
Yeah.
you know how to do that and
Yeah.
make it awesome.
Exactly. Yeah. The thing I remember about it is the ambiance. To go back to that again, I remember the music being really cool, really ambient, really set the mood very nicely, and I remember this was at the time, like as you said, it was sort of from the same research and development as that led to the creation of FF7, and so it has the same sort of like polygonal models with pre-rendered backgrounds, and some of the interpretations of New York and the environments you go through aren't exactly 100% accurate in that way that Japanese interpretation of Western culture can be, and but they're also interesting and unique. And yeah,
It definitely was a lot better implemented than a lot of things we've seen from Japan.
yeah, no, it's hardly like glaringly weird or anything. It's pretty well done as far as that goes. Yeah.
Yeah, or just I don't know. I guess also another thing with it is that props to the writer and the team for the character of like Daniel, who's his partner. Because think about it, he's a black guy, but he doesn't have too many of the over the top like cliche traits. He's actually like a divorced father who's trying to take care of his kid.
Yeah. How about that? Because that is something Japanese always take flack for is their black characters.
Yeah, like they give them afros, and here's a guy that actually seems rather grounded I mean, he was still a cop, but for the
True.
most part, or I mean, even within like the confines of female characters, Abra was a really well done female character. Because she actually felt like what would happen to a person if they got these extraordinary powers. There's a lot of moments within the game, at least when during the downtime, where it's like, what the hell am I?
Mm-hmm.
You don't see that too often.
Yeah, introspection in a video game isn't that often.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, yeah, it never does, except maybe like some elements of like Metal Gear Solid
Yeah,
when the few times people talk to Snake. But even than that, yeah, it doesn't exist for the most part.
yeah. That's. I was actually just gonna mention Metal Gear Solid. Yeah. The other thing I remember about the game, this is kind of just like a goofy thing, but uh, the scenes where you're in the car driving the squad car, and the way that they sort of cheated that to make it seem like you're moving, they would have these streaks of light, uh, like a effect on the car, and they moved so fast it was as if you were like, going at warp speed or something.
Yeah, and yet like the characters like looking at you while
Mm,
they're driving at warp.
yeah, yeah. They didn't nail that effect, but I sort of enjoyed that anyway.
Also just all the things about it, like the was it the entire way the scenario plays out is actually somewhat believable given how absurd it is.
Hmm.
Like after like the second time that they have a huge disaster happen, they realize that Eve's staying in New York. They evacuate the entire city.
Right.
Like that's not usually what happens in fiction. Usually, what happens if there's a threat in fiction, there's always the idiot mayor who's like, "Well, we can't close down because of some re-election thing that's going on," or
Yeah, there's a certain, I suppose, it's easy to just decide to turn it into like a disaster sort of situation and just kill off a lot of people to make it more exciting. Whereas they go the route of, and again, I mentioned the ambiance in this game. I think that adds to it a lot. Like and it takes place. I'm pretty sure like in the winter and there's snow and stuff.
yeah, a big part of the game was that it took place in Christmas Eve to like New Year's.
Right. Yeah. So you're
Which
just in this like desolate New York, and there's snow on the ground and stuff. There's just something about that that gives the game a really cool sort of setting.
yeah, because at least ultimate within it is that it's a place that people live in, and then suddenly it's empty.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually like covered the aftermath of all that in the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like you remember it better than I do. I haven't played it since I played it when it came out, but uh,
I've played through it every like 2 to 3 years at least once.
okay, so it really is one of your favorite games that you revisit.
I don't entirely, as I said, I don't necessarily know why. It's just I'm able to play. I guess it's just like it's like a book you really enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
You can just pick it up and go through it.
Yeah, cool. Well,
Yeah, I guess it helps it was directed by the guy that directed Chrono Trigger, so there's those little touches to it.
oh, is that true? I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, the combat system's sort of like
Mm-hmm.
trying to advance Chrono Trigger, because Chrono Trigger was always about the combat taking place in the actual place you were.
Right. To be honest, I always felt like that was the most underdeveloped element of the game, though. The sort of placing within the field in terms of the combat, I didn't really feel was ever taken advantage of as much as it could have been. But
Well, yeah, but
it's a
it's a neat idea. I would have liked if they had advanced it.
right. Actually, I meant to ask you if you played. Um, oh God, what's it called? The other Square PS1 game that has a similar sort of combat system.
Vagrant Story.
Yeah, there you go. Did you play that?
I have it. Yeah, I didn't play it too much. I
Okay.
was busy. I got a hold of it and then I got occupied with other things and it kind of fell to the wayside.
Okay. Because I know a lot of people like that game, and I always compare the two in my head. And I did play Parasite Eve. I didn't play Vagrant Story. I have it on like the PS1 classics and played like the first hour. I haven't gone back to it, but yeah, they remind me in terms of the combat. They seem similar.
Yeah. I guess just real quick with it, I think that Parasite Eve does have one of the better like climaxes to a game that I've seen because it actually is like a real climax. There's an actual ending after everything is said and done. Unlike most games, which is where it's just kind of you finally beat the last boss and the game's over like in 3 minutes.
Right. Yeah, it does. It is sort of a difficult problem, I guess, with a lot of games where you want to have a culmination that takes place with the boss battle, and then there's nothing left after that.
Yeah. And then most designers are just like, well, game's over.
Right.
Credits roll, bye.
Yeah. Well, I enjoy it when they sort of skip the final battle, the final boss battle, and do something a little more interesting. That it doesn't happen very often, but
Yeah. Well, not everything needs a last boss battle. Well, I guess that's a discussion for a different time.
yeah, true. Okay, well, I will mention another one I didn't put on like my agenda, but to sort of wrap it up, this is the most recent. I guess you can call it inspirational. It's a bit of a stretch, but the game Cookie Clicker. I'll admit to being hooked on for.
Math, the Breaking Bad one.
What's that?
Oh, there's a Breaking Bad version of Cookie Clicker.
Oh God, you shouldn't have told me that.
Yeah, run a meth empire.
Oh.
Cookie Clicker might as well be meth. Actually, if anything, that goes to show that that's all the psychology of those free-to-play games in
Yep.
a nutshell.
Exactly. It's a game. It's a game that is that, and is a parody of that at the same time.
Yeah.
Which I think is what sort of spoke to me and like made me hate it so much because it's like this game is so perfectly designed to tap into that part of my psyche, and at the same time wants to be making a statement about the evilness of that idea. It's like I don't think you can have it both ways. This is so upsetting to me, but I can't stop playing it.
It's our it's the problem with our particular psychology that we've finally figured out how to like certain aspects of how our psychology work, like things like scarcity principle and all these other things,
Mm-hmm.
and we're just abusing ourselves as a species with them.
Yeah. Yeah, we have more free time than we know what to do with, so we waste it on this sort of thing, I suppose.
Yeah.
And, some people would argue that video games are just time wasters. And Cookie Clicker definitely is that to a T.
Well, I guess what's a matter of is that it isn't necessarily as much of a waste of time as if after you're done with it or when you finish with whatever you're doing, you actually have some sort of like potentially like realization or just something besides just how you feel after playing Cookie Clicker.
Yeah. Yeah, that game is kind of all about giving you a sense of emptiness after you are done with it.
Yeah.
Whereas, hopefully a more truly inspiring work is all about giving you a different perspective or insight into something that you didn't have before.
Yes, and then we'll have to hunt down Edward Snowden and thank him someday for this podcast.
That's right, yeah, because he was the inspiration for this podcast.
Yeah.
All right, so did we cover it all?
Yeah, I think so. I think this was worked out really well.
Yeah, I didn't know how much we'd have to say about everything, but we went for a good 2 hours there.
Yeah, I think that's what we'll aim for whenever we do one of these. We'll try to go for about 2 hours,
Yeah.
maybe like 15 minutes before or after.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 2 hours feels like such a long time to me, but we end up just doing it without even trying too hard, so if people are willing to stick through it that long, then I suppose there's a good reason to keep it that long.
Well, I think is what we were covering when we're talking about doing these more often, or at least at a separate rate,
Mm-hmm.
is that we need to have subjects or topics that there's actually something of substance to say.
Right.
Like we're not going to be doing this every week. We're just sort of doing this the week after because we sort of started this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, if there's nothing that we're really feeling to talk about, then yeah, no reason to do it.
Yeah. I think every 2 weeks. I think enough stuff can happen in the
Yeah.
the intermediary,
Mm-hmm.
and well, also because I feel that we're at least somewhat intelligent, and we
Mm-hmm. I like to think.
cultured beyond.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you were saying?
I like to think I am a little bit.
Yeah.
Um. Well, I guess we might as well just do our sign off now, and that way we can wrap it up.
Yeah.
All right. I realized I forgot to, have us introduce ourselves at the beginning, but I guess we can say it now at least. Um,
Yeah.
I've been Matt.
I am Isaac.
Okay, and I continue to be Matt even after the podcast. Um, so yeah, uh, I don't know if you want to like get.
This has been the Bowser
But
Co-op podcast of Edward Snowdenness
there you go.
the
Yes.
second.
Okay. Well, thanks for listening then.
Uh, thanks for having me. I really do enjoy this,
Yes.
and I hope the next topic is as fun as this one was.
Yes. Me too.